Oh, thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining on what was relatively short notice, and apologies in advance for any technological glitches tonight. This is my first time trying to do this. I've attended what feels like a million of them, but I did not realize the things I needed to understand to host one. So thank you in advance for being patient with me. So tonight we are going to hear from our Benton County Elections officials. We have not just some of the best election officials in the state, but really in the country. And that goes for Linn County too. Steve Druckenmiller was disappointed that he couldn't join us this evening. He had a family obligation, but he has just been such an extraordinary advocate for Oregon's vote by mail system and really making it stronger and safer and more secure for just such a long period of time, as has James. But as you all know, we have an election coming up, and one very significant topic of discussion is the security of our elections. And I've had a lot of people asking me what happens after they turn their ballot in. And the questions have ranged from everything from who monitors, who opens up those ballot drop boxes that we take our ballots to what if the elections office doesn't recognize my signature on the back of my ballot? Could somebody else take my ballot and vote for me? What happens if I don't get a ballot? When do we get to start counting the ballots? What if I'm postmarked on time, but it doesn't get there until 3 days later? And so all of these questions, I think, are best answered by our elections officials, who I think are going to start by just giving us an overview of how it works, why the system is secure, and what safeguards are in place to take care of the security of your ballot, which is really, in my opinion, one of the most important things you'll ever have. You have it for a short time, it's really important, and then you give it away, and it has a lot of power when it gets counted. So with that, I will turn it over to our esteemed officials. James, do you want to kick it off?
Okay, sure. Thank you, Senator Gelser. I appreciate everything you said. And I do want to introduce Darla Rush. She's our new elections manager who came to us from Clatsop County.
Thank you.
We'll kind of be switching off, taking different areas that we primarily cover. I'll start by just saying that election security is not a new thing that we're dealing with just for this election in Benton County or throughout the state of Oregon. It's always been way at the top of our priority list. We file a security plan, which is confidential with the state of Oregon each January. And we've done so this year as well, which allows us to begin the process of opening and preparing ballots for counting starting 7 days prior to the election. Now, we've never typically started as far as the tabulation part that early. We've usually waited till the Monday, Tuesday, or at the earliest, the Friday prior to the election before we did our certification of the final certification of the equipment before we started processing ballots through. So speaking of the certification, that's part of one of the security aspects of what we do is our equipment is certified multiple times during the election process. First, we do what's called a pre-election certification, where I run a full complement of ballots through the equipment to ensure that everything has been programmed correctly. Then we have a pre-election certification, where we invite all of the parties and candidates to be present. Unfortunately, we are in the 1888 courthouse where we are very limited in space. So we have set up here some monitors out in the foyer area outside of our area and we have cameras on every aspect of the election process. Wherever the ballots go, we have security cameras that are recording everything that we're doing and every location where the ballots are visiting. So having mentioned that, that's another piece of what we do. One of the things we did this year that was different than in the past is we had a security assessment conducted by the Department of Homeland Security, along with our county IT officials being present, county facilities, as well as the sheriff's emergency management staff. They went through every aspect of our election facilities and systems to provide us with feedback and pointers as to things that we might be able to do to improve security. They were actually very impressed with what we already had in place here in Benton County, because we're one of the few facilities that has a secure entry in place all the 24/7 here at the courthouse. Plus we have vaults that are dedicated to our elections equipment and processes and the ballots. A lot of places they might have secure rooms, but we actually have vaults that our equipment and processes are located within. Of course, one of the great secure processes here in Oregon is just having a paper ballot. By having paper ballots, that adds to the security of the process, in that we can always go in and do a hand recount if we suspect that something has occurred in our equipment. And our equipment, another thing there is it's not connected to the internet in any way. We have a hardened system where we moved we have multi-layers. That's part of having a secure system. So we have the paper ballot. We've got a standalone tabulation system. We've got printouts that can come out of that system. It's got an onboard hard drive. We've got thumb drives that we transfer the results to our hardened laptop that we generate the results at, and then we take it from there, yet another step from that hardened laptop to our internet connected PC. And all the reports along the way, we're checking to make sure they match up. Then we get it loaded up to the state system and our local website for our voters to see at the end. There's just so many layers. I really have a hard time going through all of these things. I feel like I need to just take questions and know which part of the process that you have questions about. Maybe I should let Darla talk a little bit about what happens with the ballots when they come in from the drop sites, a little bit maybe about our drop site pickup teams where we and the new boxes that we've installed. In the primary, you might know that we had some of our indoor locations that had closed due to COVID-19. To avoid seeing that happen again, we took measures to secure additional 24-hour ballot drop box and get them located out at those locations. The one that might seem the most different, I guess, as far as where it's located is the OSU campus drop site that was at the library that had been closed during the pandemic. And now that's going to be next to Gill Coliseum and the stadium. We have an outdoor box there now. But if you want to go into it, Darla, I'll
Sure.
go into the travels of the ballot.
Travels of the ballot. Okay, so when you drop your ballot into one of our many drop boxes around the county, that we have election officials that are given an oath, and they swear to uphold the election laws. They sign the oath, and they go out in parties of two, and it's from different. Like if we don't put a Democrat and a Democrat together, Republican, they're from different parties. And so they go out, they open the ballot boxes, they zip tie the lid onto the ballot box so it's secure, bring it, they sign that they have picked it up in the time, and then they bring it into our office. And then they sign when they drop it in here. Once it arrives our office, we cut the ties, mark where that box came from, count how many ballots are in there, and note that. that number then follows that batch, we call it, all the way through the process. So what happens is the ballots have a barcode on them that are scanned into the computer, and then their signatures are checked. Every single signature is checked, is looked at to verify that they match. And James, stop me if I go too long, go too short, if we need to add something.
You're doing fine.
So every single signature is checked. If we have a signature that we can tell that that person signed, but it's just a little bit off, you know, maybe they're getting older, maybe they've broken their hand. We don't know the situation, but we can tell that they did sign it. We will accept it, but we'll send them a letter and say, we accepted your ballot. Your signature is just a little bit off. Go ahead and sign, and we'll update your signature. If the signature does not match, that's a different code in the system, and that's put aside, and we send them a letter. And then they have time to come in and get that clarified, and that ballot will count if their signature matches.
And Darla, can you clarify, what if they turn that ballot in on election day and you find that at, 7:55 or 10 o'clock on election night?
They have, James, correct me, I think they have 14 days after the election to rectify that, to make it right. And then what else?
They get the letter as well, and
yes, they get the letter, and then they usually contact our office, and we will let them know. Right on the letter, it has the barcode, it has their name, and it has a signature line, so they can sign that letter, return it to us, and then we validate that, make sure that that signature is what is on that ballot, and then we'll go ahead and update their signature on file as well. So from there, they get put into a vault. And then when it is time that we can start opening them, we have machines that open the ballots that just slice the top of them. And we have people that run those through. Again, they're counted by that slicing machine to make sure that the count that is started when it arrived in my office is the same count at the slicer. And then those are taken to the boards. We call them the boards. And they are our election ballot opening boards. Again, it used to be teams, I think here in Benton County, teams of 3, but with COVID, we've had to cut back to teams of 2 for social distancing, and then we have screens and dividers that keep them separated. Everybody is given the masks, gloves if they need it. Any type of disinfectant is wiped down. Everything's wiped down. When the ballots enter that section of the process, they are to take the secrecy envelope out. They're turned upside down, so you don't even see the name on the envelope. They take the secrecy envelope out that has the ballot in it, set it to one side, the other envelope to the other, and they continue that whole process until their whole stack is done. Once their stack is complete, they zip tie those ballot envelopes together, and they're removed off the table. So the envelope that the person signs, zip tied off the table. Then they are left with the stack of secrecy envelopes and the ballots. Then they take the ballot out of the secrecy envelope, put secrecy envelope on one side, envelope still folded on the other, do the same process, go through the whole batch. The secrecy envelopes are then zip tied and removed off the table. They're left with the ballots that are folded. Then they go one by one, opening those ballots, straightening, making sure that voter intent is there, that all the bubbles are specifically marked in, that the machine can read it. Then from there, the stacks are taken into another area that has the tabulator in it. And that's where James runs, him and another election worker will run it through the machine for counting. Postmarks do not count. So ballots have to be in our office by 8 p.m. on election night. Any questions for me?
And when you say in your office by 8 p.m., if I drive up to that outdoor ballot
Oh,
box,
yes.
does that count too?
Yes, in a ballot box. And they can drop at any ballot box around, official ballot box around the state. And those will get to us. We get several from other counties that we make a list of the ballots and then immediately send them off to the different counties and notify the counties of how many are coming.
And can you talk a little bit about what happens if a ballot has coffee spilled on it or a hole burned in it? What happens in those kinds of situations?
Sure, I can speak to that. The good news is our current equipment does much better with these types of ballots than our previous equipment, where if a ballot got wet in the past and then it was kind of wavy just from having been wet, it wouldn't read well. Well, now our equipment does really great at reading ballots like that. And coffee spills aren't bad either, but if it happens to, I guess, be so dark that it marks over like a timing track, that's a big, we call those squares that are on the side of your ballot. Those are the timing track. Tells the machine when to look across or look up and down for the positions of the votes. And when those are degraded, then the processing boards will then duplicate the ballot. And we have a process for doing that. And in doing so, and actually the team at the vote tabulation equipment also acts as a board if it gets past our first board that is trying to preserve voter intent. So we can act as a board. What we'll do is duplicate the ballots. What we do is if you have a ballot that needs to be duplicated, you stamp that ballot with an identifying, and you give it an identifying number, and the persons that are going to do the duplication process have to initial that ballot as well as the blank ballot. You have to get a ballot of the same type of ballot style to duplicate the voters' votes onto from that degraded ballot. And so we do that, complete that process. We have an envelope where the original goes into, and here again, it's part of the process that I was talking about. We're having that paper trail. We can always go back. If you see a ballot that has that stamp on it, and you think we didn't transfer the votes from the original degraded ballot onto the duplicated ballot, we have that paper trail in place where we have numbered them, and we can go and say, this was the ballot that was duplicated, this is the duplicate ballot, and you marry them up to make sure everything is okay. And that's what we do when we have to do a hand recount in a close election.
And James, you mentioned duplicate ballots. One question that I get a lot is, if I have lost my ballot or my ballot doesn't come, I can come down to the elections office and get a replacement ballot. What is to prevent me from finding my other ballot later and voting again?
So, yeah,
besides the fact that that would be a felony.
Yeah.
Right. So, yes, and we would then have to turn that voter in to the Secretary of State's office for investigation. But yeah, every ballot that we issue is in the system. So if we need to issue a second or sometimes even a third ballot to a particular voter who might have moved after we generated the mailing and then ruined that ballot, that second ballot we sent them, and then needed a third ballot. So what we do is we inactivate those previously issued ballots before we or when we issue that next ballot, that replacement ballot. So the ID for that ballot envelope is no longer valid. And of course, only one ballot is accepted per voter. So we could accept it if we wanted to.
So if I came to you and got a replacement ballot and went home and my daughter said, "Hey mom, I found your ballot," and I set them both down on the kitchen table and later went back to vote, I would need to be sure I voted on the ballot I actually picked up from you.
You would want to, but we still have ways that we can resolve that. If you only send back the first ballot that we issued to you, we will set that ballot aside. It's been inactivated. If it turns out by the time we get to 8 p.m. on election day that we never got another ballot back from you, we will count that ballot for that voter.
Right. And then one more, and I'll turn it over to other people. We have a lot of students in the community sometimes that come from out of state and change their voter registration to here in Benton County, or they may go to another state and they've come from Benton County and they end up getting ballots from 2 different states. What should they do? They need to contact someone to have that undone?
Typically, voters that change states and need to attest to the oath on the ballot do notify their previous location, if they're going to register in a new state. We have come a long way actually in tying states' data together. Oregon, for one, is involved in a data sharing collective called ERIC through the Pew Center, and I believe there's 36 states or something like 29 that are sharing data, and we have in fact found persons that did that. They were registered in, say, California and came here and asked for a second ballot without canceling their voter registration or saying, oh, I better not vote in Oregon, I already voted in California. When we have had to forward those on for investigation. But we do have ways of checking state to state now. It's not completely across the US, but it is getting close.
And how much postage should I put on my ballot if I want to mail it?
Postage is free in Oregon. Well, it's paid by the state.
Yeah, so and I just want to give a kudos to the U.S. Postal Service. They've taken a lot of heat here, and with everything that's been floating in the media. I don't know, I wouldn't call it the media's fault, but everything that's been shared through social media and other avenues. And our partners with the Postal Service have just been phenomenal here in Oregon. If anything, I've seen them pick up their game, if you want to call it that, a bit, and have really been going to extreme measures to make sure that we get all the materials we needed delivered on time. By the way, speaking of which, how many have received their voters pamphlet? Yeah, I got mine. Yeah, I think it was on Wednesday, the very first.
I didn't get mine yet. I haven't received mine yet.
Yeah, and with that, I would say, if it doesn't come in, we have the voters pamphlet on our website. We have the state pamphlet and the county pamphlet posted separately. So if for some reason your voters pamphlet does not show up, we have those posted on the Benton County Elections website.
And Edie, they're coming kind of all across the week, and I believe that yours will come from Lynn County, won't it?
Yes.
And so I don't believe that all of those are out yet, but I will tonight send you an email with the link to the online version of that ballot, of the voter pamphlet.
I also just tossed it in the chat, Sarah.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Also, in Lynn County, there was another person that didn't receive theirs. And like you said, they're going out in waves over there to the voters. But we made sure that we had some delivered to the post office there in Albany. So if somebody wants to go to the post office, they're available there for them.
Right.
Right. One of the areas that we have particular challenges, but the Postal Service has been really great in trying to help us solve how this works, is the voters pamphlets go to every household, so every mailing address. When we have like assisted living centers, they might just have the one address, but there's hundreds of voters there. So we ask them to drop a stack of voters pamphlets there, not just one, when they go to those types of addresses. So yeah, like I said, they've been really great to work with.
So James, there's a question in the chat about when people should expect to receive their ballots.
Do you want me to answer that, James?
Sure.
Ballots are going out, going to be mailed out October 14th, and we're letting voters know, give it until October 21st. If you don't receive your ballot by October 21st, then contact us either via email or call us, and we'll make sure we get it taken care of for you.
And hey, Lena, if you wouldn't mind throwing this in the chat too, but as you're waiting for your ballot to come, you can also go to oregonvotes.gov, and there's a section there, a little tab that's called My Vote, and you can see where your ballot is at, and after you've turned it in, you can make sure that it's been received. It's a really great tool. You can also check, I know the last couple of cycles as I've been calling through doing Get Out the Vote, I've found people right up to the election that have still been waiting for their ballot. And we've been able to use that oregonvotes.gov to realize that maybe they had not updated their mailing address. So we were able to get them kind of redone and get a ballot out to them. Not re-registered because the registration deadline will have passed, but for the address. And you can always go to your local elections office to get a ballot.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about the Oregon vote by mail system is as long as you've been registered in the state of Oregon, even if you got inactivated for maybe not responding to some mailings that we might have sent you, or we might have received some information that you moved, you can still reactivate your voter registration all the way up and receive a ballot all the way up to 8 p.m. on election day.
And the other question in the chat is, how late can the ballots be mailed? What is the last day that you can safely put it in a mailbox rather than hand deliver it to one of the many drop boxes?
Which one? We're saying October 27th is probably the last day. October 26th, 27th. After that, we say put it in one of the drop boxes.
And I think one more thing that I would add to that is when you're taking it to a drop box or to a place, make sure that it is an official ballot drop box. I think one of the things that made me so sad, and it happened with voter registration rather than with a ballot, but my office address is the same number as the courthouse, just southwest instead of northwest. And I came in 2 days after the voter registration deadline a couple of years ago, and there were voter registration cards underneath my door, and it was past the deadline, so we could not do that. And I have found ballots under my door, but I now kind of religiously go to the office to double check to make sure that there's no ballots that are left laying there. But you know, there is signage, it will say it is an official ballot box, and you really want to make sure that that's where you are putting it, in an official ballot box.
Hey, Senator Gelser, I'm going to have to ask you to put this as an unofficial drop box at your office.
No, I don't want to encourage you. Do not bring your ballot to my office, please.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Are there other questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself to ask if you have a question?
There is a question in the chat. How do we find out where the official ballot drop-off boxes are at? And I'm grabbing some links too.
Thank you, Lena.
So we do have it on the last page of the Benton County section of the voters pamphlet. So in the section that's grayed from the state, it is on the very last page of that. You'll find it on our website. You'll go under voter registration, and then you'll see the link to the November 3rd election, and then it will show the ballot. It'll have a link to the drop sites.
Great. And Lena, you're so good at these links. Would you toss Lynn County up there too, please, for the drop sites, if you can find it? And I do know also that oregonvotes.gov also has all of the official drop boxes in the state. The next question is, when doing GOTV, what if we reach someone who mailed in their ballot too late? For instance, a voter says they mailed it on election day. Are they allowed to come into the courthouse and vote?
So let me see if I understand the question. If somebody says mailed their ballot on election day, then they realize that it was probably too late and they're nervous that it's not going to be accepted, which let me just tell you, if that applies to any of you, like I was telling you how great our postal partners have been. Any ballot that makes it into their hands by, I would say, 7 p.m. on election day, we do what's called postal sweeps across the state. And as long as it's at the main post office in your area, you're going to have your count. We're going to check the Corvallis post office. Lynn County is going to check the Albany post office. Multnomah County goes to the main PDX station. And we do what's called postal sweeps, and we try and pick up every ballot that made it to the post office on time in those locations. However, in this case, somebody says that they would like to cast a provisional ballot because they believe that it might not get in. We will issue a provisional ballot. We just won't accept it immediately. We'll wait to see if that other ballot arrives before we count that provisional ballot.
James, that reminded me of another question that I've gotten several times. Let's say I voted. I vote the day that I get my vote. And thank you, Lena just put Lynn County's Dropbox locations in there. Thank you, Lena. But I voted as soon as I got my ballot, and then I learn something new and get really angry and have changed my mind about how I want to vote. Can I get my ballot back and re-vote after I've turned it in?
No, Oregon law does not allow someone, once you cast your ballot, you cast your vote. We do not issue provisional ballots based on that type of information. So make sure you know how you want to vote before you cast that ballot.
Good advice.
Speaking of knowing how you want to vote, I want to give a plug to our Benton Better Ballot campaign, which is our campaign for ranked choice voting for county commissioner. It's new to Oregon. It's new to Benton County. It's not new to the U.S., but it is a first-time thing here. We're really excited about it. We've got a great informational web page up there. I want to encourage everybody, if you have a chance, to take a look at it. We've got a flyer that we're going to put in the newspaper that will direct you there. If you happen to get the Democrat Herald or the GT, I know I got our PIO is working on that for us. And on the other side of the ranked choice voting information, we have the ballot drop sites. So that might prove helpful to some as well.
And James, could you explain briefly what ranked choice voting is and what that will look like on the ballot when people receive it?
Well, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but the best way to explain it is you're going to have an opportunity to rank your top 3 choices for county commissioner. Well, it just so happens that we have 3 candidates for position 2 and position 3 on the ballot for this general election. So you'll be able to rank your candidates. If you don't want to rank one of those, you'll also have the opportunity to add a write-in as one of your rankings. But I just want to give people a heads up on what they're to expect to see on the results for ranked choice voting. Because we have that 14-day resolution period and we'll be waiting for ballots that might have been dropped off in other counties, we're not going to have a full set of ballots needed for the ranked choice voting release of results. So what I will be posting is that first choice ranking. That's what voters are going to see. I mean, that's typically what you're used to seeing, right? Who's your first choice? But in order for me to implement the process of going through the rounds for the ranking, so the whole idea of ranked choice voting is one of the candidates has to receive 50% of the vote plus 1, so more than 50%. And if none of the candidates who receive more than 50% of the first choice votes, then we go to what's called the next round, where the candidate that received the lowest number of votes is then eliminated. So I would suspect that might be the write-ins would be the first to be eliminated in most cases, unless there's a really strong write-in campaign. And what we do is we go to those ballots, the ballots that where the write-ins occurred, and we go and look at the second choice on those ballots, and we transfer it to the remaining candidates in the contest. So that's really unique. It's not just looking at how many first choice votes did that candidate get, how many second choices votes did they get, how many third choice votes did they get. That's not how it works. We actually go to the ballots of the eliminated candidate, and we transfer the second choice votes to the remaining candidates in the contest, and so on for the third choice.
And if someone gets over 50% in the first round, are they just the winner?
They would just be declared the winner. That's correct.
Great. There's another question, how to find out if a ballot has been received.
I believe you mentioned the My Vote tool that is on the oregonvotes.gov website, which is also the Secretary of State's website. I just follow the My Vote tool that is on there by putting your name and other information that it asks for. I don't think I've used it to track my ballot myself, so I have a hard time explaining this. And that'll let you know whether we've received your ballot, whether we've accepted your ballot, or even if your ballot has been challenged. But keep in mind that these tools that we're utilizing, they do have a lag in time, just like online voter registration. There's a lag before the data gets between the state system and down to the counties. Could be a day, could be a couple days sometimes.
Any more questions? Give me a second. I don't see any, but if you're trying to get in and trying to unmute, I'll give you another second while I just want to say thank you to Darla and James for making time now in what is an incredibly busy season. If you've ever had time to go and visit the elections office on election day or the days leading up to the election, it is an extraordinary thing to see. It is a lot of people working together, really treating every single one of those envelopes and ballots with extraordinary respect. It's not the time now because of the pandemic, but really watching people sit there and go through. It's not a computer that is checking these signatures. People are looking at these signatures. It is an extraordinary amount of work and an extraordinary number of people that it takes to operate these elections and to protect every last vote. And I think this year especially, I just really appreciate the nimbleness that our elections officials have had to figure out, how do you do this when everybody has to stay apart and you have to have multiple eyes on, and just for the professionalism and friendliness that's always there in your office. We are so lucky, and the same can be said of Lynn County as well. And I did notice there's another question. Are there any dangers in using outdoor ballot drop boxes?
Well, of course,
That's a good question.
There are some dangers, and we try and mitigate those as well as we can by putting first very secure boxes that have been permanently, I guess, mounted to their location. We look for very public locations often with security cameras on the box. In many of the cases, so that's the case. The boxes themselves are fire, I guess, suppressant, where a fire would suffocate if somebody tried to throw something in there that might start a fire. We're also adding additional fire suppression protection to all of our boxes. One of the things that we talked about earlier was how we're logging every ballot pickup. And one of the reasons for that is if something were to happen to one of our boxes between a certain time period, we will have a log of the last time we picked up that box. And if something, say, happened a couple hours or in between pickups, where the next time we pick up, we notice something is not right with the box, or maybe it's been broken into, or we will be able to alert any voters that utilize that box, and we will know the time frame which something like that may have occurred, so that we can deal with it at least in an organized fashion and providing good information as to when was the last time. So let's say, yeah, there is risk. I mean, there's always some risk when you're looking at putting something like that outdoors and in the elements, but we are trying to do everything we can with our processes and where we locate these boxes and the type of boxes that we get installed to make sure that that we have a secure place for everyone to drop their box. And if something were to happen, we'll be able to provide everybody with accurate information as to when that might have occurred.
I have a question.
All right, go for it.
One time I was working in California and I wanted to vote in Oregon because my residence is here, and I had a lot of trouble doing that. So do you mail absentee ballots to California or not? It might have been because it was too close to the election day. Could you talk about that, how long in advance you would need to submit a ballot from another state?
I'll let Darla take this.
So we have absentee voters from all over the world, and we do mail ballots out to them. We also, yes, if it's too close to the election, you know, we're not able to mail it out.
Okay.
That could have been I don't know, you know, what the situation was, but
So
we
what's
do.
too close? How many days or weeks would be too close?
The last day that we can mail absentees, put on the spot here, James.
I'm
Help
sorry.
me out.
It's the Thursday prior to the election is the last day we can mail, but I mean, if you're in California, you'd probably still get it.
You'd still, yeah.
But then you'd have to find a way to get it back to Oregon pretty quickly.
Yeah, that was the problem. Even FedEx wasn't going to cut it. So,
Right.
okay, so it does work. It's just you have to
Yes.
do it in a timely
Yeah,
way.
and you know, with notice, I mean, we send out of-state ballots 30 days prior to the election, so those are already out. We send overseas and military ballots go out 45 days prior to the election, and,
Okay.
and they also have electronic means for casting their ballot as well.
And
Okay,
those are already coming back in quite
Okay,
heavily.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another place where that oregonvotes.gov is very helpful. I know that I helped my daughter, who is in Washington State, walked her through the process of going online just to change her address. It didn't need to be an absentee ballot. It just changed the address to which her ballot was mailed, and that was very easy. There are a couple more questions, so I'm going to go backwards. For people who are voting overseas, do they vote by mail or is it in an embassy office? And will the campaign keep its old techniques? Oh, I'll answer that one later about campaigning and COVID. So, or do you mean, Kareem, do you mean in COVID or do you mean overseas?
For the campaign, I mean the old techniques, so doors to doors, distribution leaflets, talking to people. So I mean these techniques for local campaigns.
But are you asking if the campaigns do that for voters that are voting overseas?
No, I mean your local
Got it.
voters. Okay.
All right.
In the time of COVID, of course.
All right. Well, after we answer the elections questions, I will answer the campaign question about that. So, James,
Okay.
what about where do they vote by mail or in embassy offices?
We always start with going by mail, where we, like I said, 45 days prior to the election, we mail out the ballots to overseas voters. We do have is it 26 countries, Darla, that are on a list that
26 countries, yep.
that are not receiving mail. And those countries, any voters that Benton County has in those countries, we've contacted them to let them know that they should probably use the online electronic ballot marking tool. And then we offer them assistance if they're having any trouble accessing that, because I know it took a little while for that to get going. I think it was like probably 42 days prior instead of 45 days prior that tool became available. So yeah, we just let them know, hey, there's a little delay. We'll let you know as soon as it's ready, or we'll send them the electronic tools ourselves via email.
And Kareem, I'm going to come back to the campaign question at the end of the elections questions. But when you're talking about the online ballot, can you talk a little bit about accommodations and options for voters with disabilities?
Yeah, there's a couple of options that we offer. We have an HTML ballot that can be read by a screen reader, and that's for those that have visual impairment. That is the tool of their preference. That's the ballot style of their preference. And actually, some of the other voters will use that as well, just because they didn't know which one to choose, so they just picked one. HTML or a PDF ballot is the two version of the electronic ballots that are available.
Thank you. And I seem to recall the iPad ballot kind of coming in. I know I've supported my son who has an intellectual disability so that he can vote without my knowing how he's voting. Is that still available?
Yeah, that's the HTML ballot.
Okay, great. Two other questions that are in the box. One is whether or not there's any police surveillance on the boxes. And then the other is, you've described a lot of the security practices that take place here in Benton County. Are similar procedures followed in other counties, or are these just unique to Benton County?
Oh, we've got a great bunch of clerks in the state of Oregon, and we collaborate continually year-round to, I guess, mine what's the best, the best practices and the ideas that we come up with that that could be helpful to other counties, and we try and share with one another. But we also have a common set of tools or rules that we follow, or guidelines. It's called the Oregon Vote by Mail Manual, and that guides us through much of the legal requirements of how you're going to get this vote by mail election done. But when we talk about some of the other ideas, like fire suppression and ballot drop boxes, stuff like that, that's not really in the manual, but we talk about them amongst one another and try and come up with what's working out there. We tested our different drop boxes to see if they were even needed, because these boxes, like I said, they kind of act as fire suppression units all on their own. There's not a whole lot of oxygen in there. Stuff like that, so we're just constantly trying to figure out what we need to do and how to best to do it for the voters.
And I just want to make a clarification about the captions that are running along. It continues to change the word fires to buyers, and I just want to clarify that there are no buyers in the ballot box. This is about fire protection and not there are no buyers, and we're trying to not have any fires.
I guess I need to enunciate.
And then what about the issue of the police surveillance?
So do you want me to, we don't have police surveillance at the ballot drop sites, but we do have the, like James stated earlier, in a lot of our places that we have placed the ballot drop boxes, there are cameras there that we can, if something happens to the ballot box, we can go back to that camera and see what took place. And the police, if something happens to one of the ballot boxes, the police will be notified.
Great. And so I've got two questions, one from Vicki in the second half of Kareem's. Are there any more ballot election security questions before I go on to those final two? No? All right. So the first question from Vicki was how to get a copy of the transcript of the meeting if you want to share this with somebody else. The video is being recorded and the captions are pasted to the video, and I will put that back out. I will post that up to both Facebook and YouTube, and I will send a link to those to everybody that's been here, and I will try to post it to social media. One of the challenges that I found in publicizing this event is that I suppose it's a good thing. There are a lot of protocols around advertising for politically related issues. And so this wasn't necessarily landing directly in people's feeds. You had to directly go to my website to find it or open up my newsletter. So I need to figure out how I get myself verified so that we can put this information out. And I would just ask for your help in sharing links to the videos because many people have these questions. It's certainly not a partisan issue. It is an issue of making sure people feel confident in our election system and that they're getting their ballots turned in. So I will directly email you the links to those. And I believe I can also download a transcript, but I'm still learning, and I'll let you know about that, Vicki. And then Kareem had the question about campaigning in the midst of COVID. I think that has been, for those that are engaged and involved in campaigns, an evolving issue. I think most people have agreed it's not best practice right now to go and show up and knock on somebody's door. But some people are dropping literature. I think there are, a lot of people from all the campaigns and both parties that are doing telephone calls and text banks. And I think you see a lot on social media, YouTube, TV ads, streaming ads, but just not quite so much of the face-to-face conversation. I think that has created some challenges, not just from the point of view of a candidate that's trying to get their messages out, but I have noticed that there seems to be less awareness and discussion of things like ballot measures, for instance, because we're not all out together at the wonderful forums that the League of Women Voters puts together. We're not out together at gatherings and house parties. I think we've had fewer opportunities to engage in some of those conversations. So I would just urge everybody to really dive into that voters pamphlet, and then also go online, read about the campaigns, talk to people that you know and trust as you're making those decisions about those ballot measures, because that is a change. And I did just get in a note that in one of the campaigns, people are not going door to door, but they're dropping literature without ringing the doorbells, and that mailings have been used, and obviously phone calls are going to be used as well. All right. Well, Darla and James, thank you so very much for agreeing to do this on such short notice. And thanks to all of you that came. And Lena, thank you for showing up and doing these admin functions. It's always very difficult to function without Lena, who's just really great. So thank you, Lena, for stepping up. And I will get this posted and sent out to all of you. If you have any questions, any issues, reach back out to me. I'll do my best to answer any questions that I have. And most importantly, make a plan to vote and get your ballots in. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Was that Sasquatch?
Thank you so much.
Check it out. It's Sam Sasquatch.
Thank you.
Thank you
Better ballot.
very much. and wish you hard luck.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.